The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Senate stretched across the horizon like a frozen ocean wave. Inside, 847 different species gathered in their designated sections, each area carefully designed to meet the specific environmental needs of its occupants. The aquatic representatives floated in their water-filled chambers, while the silicon-based lithoids rested on heated platforms that glowed red with thermal energy. Above them all, the gas giant dwellers drifted in their pressurized spheres, their tentacled forms visible through the transparent. Walsdot Administrator Kethvar of the Zephyrian Dominion adjusted his ceremonial robes and activated the massive holographic display at the center of the chamber. His species looked remarkably like tall, thin humans except for their pale blue skin and the 4 arms that moved with practiced efficiency. Today's agenda was routine, the quarterly assessment of emerging civilizations in the outer spiral arms of the galaxy. The Senate recognizes the Planetary Assessment Committee, Kethvar announced, his voice carried by translation devices to every corner of the vast chamber. Present your findings on candidate species for monitoring, protection, or termination protocols. A squat, 6-legged creature with crystalline features approached the central podium. This was Examiner Void Song of the Crystalline Collective, one of the galaxy's most respected xenobiologists. Their voice sounded like wind chimes and a gentle breeze as they spoke. Honorable delegates, we have completed our survey of 733 worlds in the target sectors. Most show expected patterns of development or decline. However, we have several items requiring immediate attention. The holographic display shifted to show a star map of the outer spiral arm, with various systems highlighted in different colors. Green indicated stable, developing civilizations. Yellow marked species under observation. Red showed worlds requiring intervention or protection. Black meant extinction, either natural or artificial. We begin with positive developments, Voidsong continued. The Kepler 442 system shows remarkable progress. The dominant species has achieved interplanetary travel and established peaceful contact with 3 neighboring worlds. We recommend continued monitoring with potential advancement to protected status within 2 standard cycles. A murmur of approval rippled through the chamber. Protected status meant a species had proven itself worthy of eventual Senate membership, a rare achievement that took most civilizations thousands of years to reach. However, Voidsong's tone shifted, becoming more somber. We also have several extinctions to report. The Vega 7 civilization destroyed itself through biological warfare. The inhabitants of Ross 128b were eliminated by an asteroid impact they failed to prevent, despite having the technology to do so. And they paused, checking their datapad. The Sol 3 system has gone dark. Kethvar leaned forward with interest. Sol 3 had been on the watch list for decades. The species there, humans they called themselves, had shown unusual promise and disturbing tendencies in equal measure. They had developed nuclear technology and space travel with remarkable speed, but they had also demonstrated a concerning capacity for violence and environmental destruction. Elaborate on Sol 3, Kethvar requested. Voidsong manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on a small yellow star with several planets orbiting around it. The 3rd planet from the star appeared brown and gray, with patches of sickly green and vast areas of what looked like glowing craters. Our long-range sensors detected massive ecological collapse beginning approximately 15 standard cycles ago. The atmosphere shows radiation levels consistent with large-scale nuclear exchange. Ocean temperatures have risen beyond sustainability for carbon-based life. Most concerning, we have detected no technological signals from the planet for the past 3 cycles. All communication arrays appear to have been destroyed. The display showed a series of before and after images. The before pictures revealed a beautiful blue and green world, with white clouds swirling over vast oceans and green continents. The after images showed a devastated wasteland of brown earth, poisoned oceans, and an atmosphere thick with dust and radiation. The humans of Sol 3 appear to have followed the classic self-destruction pattern, Voidsong explained. Resource depletion led to wars. Wars led to the use of increasingly destructive weapons, and the weapons ultimately poisoned their own world. We estimate total extinction occurred approximately 2 to 3 standard cycles ago. A ripple of sadness passed through parts of the chamber. Despite their many flaws, humans had shown creativity and potential that many species found fascinating. They had produced remarkable art, music, and literature in their brief existence. Some delegates had even argued for direct intervention to prevent their self-destruction, but the Senate's prime directive forbade interference in natural development patterns. "What of their spacefaring capabilities?" asked Representative Hivemind 7 of the Insectoid Collective. "Our records indicate they had achieved orbital flight and established small colonies on their moon and neighboring planet. All space-based installations appear to have been abandoned or destroyed." Voidsong replied. "We detected debris from what was likely their primary space station. No life signs remain in any of their off-world settlements. The few automated systems that continued functioning have gradually failed over the past cycles." Kethvar nodded grimly. "Very well. The Senate officially recognizes the extinction of the human species of Sol 3. Let the record show that they reached classification level 4, spacefaring capability, before their termination. Edsel 3 to the available worlds. Registry for potential colonization by approved species." A chorus of electronic beeps and chirps filled the chamber as hundreds of different species acknowledged the decision through their various communication methods. The bureaucratic machinery of the Galactic Senate moved with practiced efficiency. Database entries were updated, territorial claims were adjusted, and the yellow star system known as Sol was transferred from the developing civilizations list to the available for colonization category. "Are there any objections to this classification?" Kethvar asked, following standard procedure. The chamber remained silent. While some delegates felt sadness at humanity's passing, none questioned the evidence. The sensor readings were clear, and the pattern was unfortunately common. Young civilizations often destroyed themselves just as they reached the threshold of becoming truly spacefaring. It was one of the galaxy's greatest tragedies, but also one of its most predictable patterns. "The classification is confirmed," Kithvar announced. "Sol 3 is hereby designated as Class Dead, available for colonization pending environmental restoration. The Terraforming Commission will assess the feasibility of atmospheric cleanup and ecosystem restoration." As the Senate moved on to other business, few delegates spared another thought for the small blue world and its vanished inhabitants. In a galaxy containing trillions of worlds and countless species, the loss of one civilization, while regrettable, was hardly unprecedented. The humans had joined the vast ranks of species that had reached for the stars but fallen short, victims of their own nature and limitations. The massive display shifted to show other worlds, other species, other decisions to be made. The business of governing a galaxy continued, and Earth Sol 3 became just another entry in the vast databases of the Galactic Senate. A footnote in the endless story of civilizations that had been and were no more. But in the cold depths of space, in systems the Senate had never bothered to survey thoroughly, the truth was very different. Humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their wisdom. It had been their stubborn refusal to give up, even when everyone, including themselves, had given up on them. The Senate's long-range sensors had detected nuclear fire and ecological collapse. They had seen radiation and devastation. They had observed the end of human civilization on Earth. What they had failed to understand was that sometimes an ending is really just a beginning. 3 standard galactic cycles had passed since the Senate officially declared humanity extinct. The small blue world once known as Earth had been sold to the Hegemony Collective, a mining consortium known for their efficient strip mining operations. The paperwork had been filed, the credits transferred, and the matter forgotten by all, but a few xenobiologists who occasionally wondered what humanity might have achieved if they had survived their violent tendencies. The current Senate session was focused on mining rights in the Andromeda sector, a routine matter involving territorial disputes between 3 different species over a particularly mineral-rich star cluster. Representative Kethvar found himself struggling to stay awake as the lithoid delegate droned on about extraction quotas and environmental impact assessments. Even the most important galactic business could become mind-numbingly boring when reduced to bureaucratic details. The sudden wailing of the station's proximity alarms cut through the tedious proceedings like a plasma cutter through steel plate. Every delegate in the massive chamber looked up in alarm as the holographic displays flickered and changed, showing the approach of an unidentified vessel. "All delegates remain calm," announced Chief Security Officer Razortail of the Reptilian Defense Corps. Her gravelly voice carried throughout the chamber by the translation systems. "We have detected a single vessel approaching the station. The ship does not respond to standard hailing frequencies and is not broadcasting any recognized identification codes." Kethvar activated his administrative override, bringing up the detailed sensor readings on the central display. What he saw made his forearms freeze in confusion. The approaching vessel was unlike anything in the Senate's extensive database of ship designs. It was primitive by galactic standards, a crude fusion drive pushing a metal hull that looked like it had been welded together by someone with limited resources and even more limited time. "The vessel appears to be damaged," Razortail continued, her reptilian features showing concern. "Hull breaches have been sealed with what looks like improvised patches. Life support systems are functioning, but barely within acceptable parameters. However, we are detecting life signs aboard the vessel." "What species?" asked Representative Voidsong of the Crystalline Collective, their musical voice carrying a note of scientific curiosity. There was a long pause before Razortail responded. "The biological readings are unusual. Carbon-based bilateral symmetry, average height approximately 1.7 meters. The computer is having difficulty making a positive identification." Kethvar felt a chill run through his pale blue skin. Those readings sounded familiar, but they couldn't be what he was thinking. It was impossible. The databases were clear. The sensor readings from 3 cycles ago were undeniable. And yet, "Magnify the visual display," he ordered. The holographic image zoomed in on the approaching vessel. It was even more primitive up close. Scarred metal plating held together with welded patches and sealed joints that looked like they had been repaired many times over. But it was the design that made Kethvar's secondary heart skip a beat. The basic configuration, the way the drive section connected to the crew compartment, even the crude letters painted on the hull. He had seen this design before, in the archived files of extinct civilizations. The letters on the hull spelled out UNSS Defiance in a script that hadn't been seen in the galaxy. "For 3 cycles, that's impossible," whispered Examiner Voidsong, their crystalline form actually changing color with shock. "The database clearly shows—" "The database is wrong," Kethvar interrupted, his voice barely controlled. "Security, establish a communication link immediately. Standard first contact protocols." "Sir, with respect, if these are the extinct humans, shouldn't we be implementing contamination procedures?" Razortail asked. "The official records show they died from radiation poisoning and ecological collapse. They could be carrying diseases or—" "Do it now," Kethvar commanded. The communication array crackled to life, and suddenly a voice filled the Senate chamber. A voice speaking in a language that had been officially dead for 3 standard cycles. "Galactic Senate Station. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the United Nations Starship Defiance, requesting permission to dock. I know this might come as a surprise, but I need to address the Senate immediately. It's about the classification of my species as extinct. I'm here to file a formal complaint." The vast chamber fell silent. 847 different species, representing the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, sat in stunned amazement. It was as if a ghost had just requested permission to join the meeting. "This is unprecedented," Kethvar managed to say, his voice barely steady. "Commander Chen, our records indicate that your species suffered total extinction 3 cycles ago. How is it possible that you are here?" "It's a long story," came the reply. And there was something in the human's voice, a mixture of exhaustion, determination, and what could only be described as barely controlled anger. "And it's one that the Senate really needs to hear, especially since you've apparently sold our homeworld to a mining company while we were still living on it." The implications hit the chamber like a shockwave. If humans were still alive, then the sale of Sol 3 to the Hegemony Collective was not just invalid. It was an act of unintentional genocide. The mining consortium had probably already begun preliminary operations, which meant they were currently destroying a world that still contained living beings. "Security, escort the vessel to Docking Bay 7, Kethvar ordered, his mind racing through the legal and political implications. "Implement biological isolation protocols, but treat this as a diplomatic contact, not a contamination event." "Understood, Administrator." "Commander Chen, follow the guidance beacons to Docking Bay 7. Do not deviate from the prescribed course." "Copy that." "And Senate Administrator, You might want to review your long-range sensor protocols. Whatever you thought you saw happened to Earth. You missed something important. 20 minutes later, the entire Senate watched their holographic displays as the primitive human vessel limped into the docking bay. The ship's hull was even more damaged than the external sensors had suggested. Scorch marks covered most of the surface, and entire sections looked like they had been rebuilt with salvaged materials. This was not the vessel of a thriving civilization. This was the desperate craft of survivors. The docking bay's atmospheric processors activated, filling the space with a standard oxygen-nitrogen mixture that would support most carbon-based life forms. Emergency medical teams stood ready, though no one quite knew what to expect from a supposedly extinct species. The ship's airlock cycled open with a mechanical grinding sound that suggested the mechanism was barely functional. A single figure emerged, moving slowly but purposefully toward the observation window where dozens of Senate security personnel waited. Commander Sarah Chen looked exactly like the archived images of humans that existed in the Senate databases. She was tall and lean with dark skin and short black hair. Her clothing was obviously military in design but showed signs of extensive repair and modification. Most striking were her eyes, dark, brown and filled with an expression that mixed exhaustion with an unmistakable determination. She carried a battered helmet under one arm and what appeared to be a collection of data storage devices in a worn shoulder bag. When she reached the observation window, she looked directly into the camera that was broadcasting her image to the entire Senate chamber. "Senators," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was doing. "My name is Commander Sarah Chen of the United Nations Deep Space Exploration Command. I am probably the last person you expected to see today, considering that your records show my entire species as extinct." She paused, looking directly into the camera with those determined brown eyes. "I'm here to inform you that reports of humanity's death have been greatly exaggerated. We're not extinct. We never were. And we have some very serious issues to discuss regarding what you've done to our solar system while you thought we were gone." The Senate chamber remained absolutely silent. In the 3,000-year history of the Galactic Senate, nothing like this had ever happened. Species didn't come back from extinction. The dead didn't file formal complaints. And yet here was Commander Sarah Chen, representing a civilization that had been declared officially dead, demanding to address the highest governing body in the known galaxy. As the implications began to sink in, one thing became very clear. This was going to be a day that changed everything. The emergency session of the Galactic Senate had been called within hours of Commander Chen's arrival. The massive chamber buzzed with nervous energy as delegates from across the galaxy tried to process the implications of a supposedly extinct species suddenly appearing in their midst. Security protocols had been upgraded, legal experts were being consulted at light speed, and more than a few representatives were quietly reconsidering their positions on various pending legislation. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the central podium, the same place where Examiner Voidsong had announced humanity's extinction 3 cycles earlier. She looked small compared to the massive scale of the chamber, but her presence seemed to fill the space nonetheless. The data storage devices she had brought were now connected to the Senate's central computer system, ready to display evidence that would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity. Administrator Kethvar called the session to order, his forearms moving nervously as he spoke. "The Senate recognizes Commander Sarah Chen representing the allegedly extinct human species of the Sol system. Commander, you have requested an emergency hearing to challenge your species' official status. Please present your evidence." Sarah activated the holographic display system with the practiced ease of someone who had spent months preparing for this moment. The first image that appeared was Earth as seen from space, but not the devastated wasteland the Senate's sensors had detected. This was a vibrant blue and green world, with artificial structures clearly visible in orbit around it. "Honorable delegates," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. 3 cycles ago, your long-range sensors detected what you interpreted as the nuclear destruction of Earth and the extinction of humanity. Your interpretation was wrong on both counts. The image shifted to show a series of massive fusion reactors scattered across Earth's surface, each one glowing with controlled stellar fire. What your sensors detected as nuclear warfare was actually the largest terraforming project in human history. Our planet was dying, Not from war, but from climate change and environmental collapse caused by our industrial development. Rather than give up, we decided to fix it. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the chamber. Representative Void Song spoke up, their crystalline form sparkling with scientific curiosity. Commander, our sensors clearly detected uncontrolled nuclear reactions and atmospheric poisoning, consistent with weapons usage. You detected controlled fusion reactions on a massive scale, Sarah corrected, advancing to the next set of images. We used fusion technology adapted from crashed alien vessels to create atmospheric processors. The radiation signatures you interpreted as weapons fire were actually us burning away the pollutants in our atmosphere and jump-starting new ecological cycles. The holographic display now showed time-lapse footage of Earth's transformation. Brown, poisoned landscapes gradually returned to green as the massive fusion reactors worked to restore the planet's climate. Dead oceans slowly returned to life as atmospheric processors removed toxins and reintroduced oxygen. As for the ecological collapse, Sarah continued, you were partially right. Our old civilization was dying. But rather than let our species die with it, we chose to evolve. What you interpreted as the end of human civilization was actually humanity's greatest exodus. The display shifted to show something that made several delegates gasp in shock. Images of human settlements on dozens of different worlds, none of which appeared in any Senate database. Space stations orbited around red dwarf stars. Enclosed cities thrived on airless moons, and vast agricultural domes covered the surfaces of previously uninhabitable planets. We've been out here for decades, Sarah explained, her voice gaining strength with each revelation, not conquering or claiming territory, but surviving. We studied your species from a distance, learned from your technologies, and adapted ourselves to life in the galaxy you thought we'd never reach. Administrator Kethvar leaned forward, his pale blue skin taking on an even more ashen tone. How many worlds? How many humans? Current population across 47 different settlements. Approximately 200 million and growing, Sarah replied matter-of-factly. We've established colonies in the Kepler system, the Wolf Star Cluster, and the Outer Rim territories that most species consider uninhabitable. We learned early that the key to survival was staying invisible. The chamber erupted in shocked conversations as the implications began to sink in. Not only were humans not extinct, but they had established a significant presence across multiple star systems without anyone noticing. For a galaxy that prided itself on comprehensive monitoring and control, this represented a massive intelligence failure. But our databases show no record of human activity in any of those systems, protested Security Chief Razortail, her reptilian features showing deep concern. Our monitoring stations would have detected any significant colonization efforts. Sarah's expression became grim. Your monitoring stations detected exactly what we wanted them to detect. We learned to mask our energy signatures by studying the wreckage of ships that various species had abandoned or lost over the centuries. We reverse-engineered cloaking technologies, adaptation techniques, and survival methods from dozens of different civilizations. She advanced to the next display, showing detailed technical schematics that made several delegates lean forward with interest. The fusion drive on my ship? Adapted from a crashed Zephyrian transport we found drifting in space. Our atmospheric processors, based on crystalline collective terraforming equipment that was left behind on a failed colony world. Our food production systems? Modified insectoid agricultural technology from a derelict cargo vessel. The uncomfortable truth was becoming clear. Humanity had survived by scavenging the discarded technology of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations and adapting it to their own needs. They had become a species of technological scavengers, taking the best ideas from multiple civilizations and combining them into something uniquely human. Where did you learn to do this? Asked Representative Hivemind 7, their compound eyes reflecting a mixture of respect and concern. From you, Sarah replied simply. We spent 50 years listening to your communications, studying your ships and learning from your mistakes. Every failed colony, every abandoned outpost, every piece of wreckage floating in space, it all became a classroom for us. We learned that the galaxy is full of civilizations that have tried and failed to expand beyond their home systems. We studied those failures and learned to do better. The display shifted again, showing human settlements that looked nothing like the cities of Earth. These were modular, adaptable structures that could be quickly assembled, modified, or abandoned as circumstances required. They were designed by a species that had learned to think of survival in terms of centuries rather than years. The sensor readings that convinced you we were extinct came from Earth. During our transition period, Sarah continued, we were in the process of relocating our entire civilization off-world. The radiation signatures were from dismantling our old industrial infrastructure and replacing it with clean fusion technology. The atmospheric changes were from our terraforming efforts. And the communications blackout was intentional, and we decided it was safer to let the galaxy think we were dead than to risk interference. During our most vulnerable period, Administrator, Kethfar's forearms moved in, agitation as he processed the information. Commander Chen, you're describing a massive deception that has lasted for decades. Your species has been deliberately hiding from galactic civilization while scavenging our technology and establishing unauthorized colonies throughout the galaxy. That's correct, Sarah acknowledged without apology, and it's kept us alive. Look at your own records, Administrator. How many species have gone extinct within 50 years of making first contact with the Galactic Senate? How many civilizations have been destroyed by galactic politics, economic manipulation, or military intervention? We studied those patterns and decided that survival was more important than recognition. The chamber fell silent as the delegates considered her words. The uncomfortable truth was that many species had indeed struggled or failed after joining galactic civilization. The transition from a single-world species to a galactic one was fraught with dangers that not all civilizations could navigate successfully. But now you're here, observed Examiner Voidsong. Why reveal yourselves now? What changed? Sarah's expression hardened. What changed is that you sold our homeworld to a mining consortium while people were still living on it. The Hegemony Collective has already begun preliminary surveys of the Sol system. They're planning to strip mine Earth, Mars, and the asteroid belt. That puts approximately 50 million humans currently living in the system at risk of extermination. The political implications hit the chamber like a shockwave. The sale of Sol 3 to the Hegemony Collective was legally binding under galactic law. But if humans were still alive and had legitimate claims to the system, then the sale was not just invalid, it was an act of genocide waiting to happen. So you see, Sarah concluded, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's determination, we're not here asking for membership in your Senate. We're not requesting protection or aid. We're here to inform you that humanity claims the Sol. The emergency recess had lasted 6 hours, during which time the Senate's legal experts, military advisors, and political analysts had worked frantically to assess the implications of Commander Chen's revelations. When the session reconvened, the atmosphere in the chamber was tense enough to cut with a plasma blade. Representatives clustered in their species-specific groups, engaged in hurried conversations that carried undertones of concern, opportunity, and barely controlled panic. Administrator Kethfar called the session to order with obvious reluctance. His pale blue skin had taken on an even more ashen tone, and his forearms moved with the nervous energy of someone facing a political crisis that could destroy his career. The Senate recognizes that the situation regarding the human species presents unprecedented legal and political challenges. We have consulted with our experts in galactic law, and the findings are complex. He activated the central holographic display, which now showed a detailed legal analysis that made several delegates wince. The sale of the Sol system to the Hegemony Collective was conducted under the legal framework for uninhabited systems, Section 7.3, which specifically applies to worlds where the indigenous species has been officially extinct for more than 2 standard cycles. However, if the human species was never actually extinct, then the sale was conducted under false pretenses. A ripple of concerned murmurs passed through the chamber. Galactic law was notoriously complex, but it was also notoriously final. Contracts approved by the Senate were binding across all member systems, and breaking them required unanimous consent, something that had never been achieved in the Senate's 3,000-year history. Furthermore, Kethvar continued, his voice becoming more strained, the legal status of an unrecognized but extant species claiming territory within galactic space creates a situation for which we have no established precedent. Commander Chen's people have been living in multiple systems for decades without Senate recognition or authorization. Under current law, they are technically illegal aliens operating without proper documentation. The implications were staggering. If humanity was classified as an illegal alien species, then the Senate would be legally obligated to either grant them emergency asylum or forcibly relocate them to designated refugee zones. Either option would create massive political and logistical problems. Representative Brass Voice of the Economic Alliance spoke up, their mechanical vocalizations carrying the cold logic of a species that viewed everything in terms of profit and loss. Administrator, what are the financial implications of canceling the hegemony contract? The collective has already invested significant resources in preliminary surveys and equipment deployment. The penalty for canceling the contract would be approximately 14 million galactic credits, plus compensation for lost profits estimated at 37 million credits. Kethvar replied grimly. Additionally, the Hegemony Collective has the right to demand alternative territories of equivalent value, which could force us to reclassify inhabited worlds in other systems. The chamber erupted in shocked conversations. 51 million galactic credits was an enormous sum, enough to fund the Senate's operations for several standard cycles. More concerning was the precedent it would set. If one major contract could be canceled due to incomplete species assessment, it would call into question every territorial sale in recent history. From the Economic Alliance section came a different perspective. Representative Gold Calculation, a tall humanoid figure covered in what appeared to be living metal, addressed the chamber with mathematical precision. Has anyone considered the potential value of the human species themselves? Their demonstrated ability to adapt alien technology and survive in hostile environments represents a significant economic asset. Rather than viewing them as a problem, we should explore the possibilities of profitable cooperation. Commander Chen, who had been listening silently from the central podium, stepped forward. With respect, Representative, my species is not for sale. We're not here to be bought, traded, or incorporated into anyone's economic calculations. We're here to reclaim our home system and establish our right to exist without interference. The tension in the chamber ratcheted up several notches. This was exactly the kind of statement that had led to wars in the past. Species that refused to acknowledge galactic authority and claimed territorial rights without Senate approval were traditionally dealt with through military action. Security. Chief Razortail activated her personal communication system, and within moments, tactical displays appeared throughout the chamber, showing the current deployment of galactic defense forces. Commander Chen, I must advise you that making territorial claims without Senate authorization is considered an act of aggression under galactic law. We have 17 battle fleets positioned throughout the galaxy, any of which could respond to such threats within standard planetary cycles. Sarah's response surprised everyone in the chamber. Instead of backing down or showing fear, she actually smiled, a human expression that most of the delegates had only seen in archived footage. Chief Razortail, I appreciate the warning, but you might want to reconsider the mathematics of that threat, Sarah said calmly. She activated her own datapad, and new information appeared on the central display. Your intelligence services have been tracking what they believe to be our 47 colony worlds. The actual number is closer to 300. The chamber fell silent. 300 human settlements would represent a population far larger than anyone had imagined. Potentially billions of humans scattered across dozens of star systems. More importantly, Sarah continued, you've been assuming that we're a primitive species that got lucky with some salvaged technology. You might want to reconsider that assessment. The display shifted to show technical schematics that made several military advisors straighten in their seats with alarm. These were not crude adaptations of alien technology. These were sophisticated systems that incorporated design elements from dozens of different civilizations, combined in ways that created entirely new capabilities. We've had 70 years to study your military technologies, Sarah explained matter-of-factly. Every battle fleet deployment, every tactical exercise, every weapons test that you've conducted in supposedly empty space, we've been watching and learning. We know the capabilities and limitations of every major military force in the galaxy. Representative Warcry of the Militant Alliance, a heavily armored creature that resembled a cross between a bear and a tank, leaned forward with obvious interest. Are you threatening military action against the Senate, human? I'm explaining our defensive capabilities, Sarah replied calmly. Humans learned long ago that the best way to avoid a fight is to make sure the other side knows exactly how much a fight would cost them. We don't want war. We've seen what your wars do to civilizations. But we also won't be steamrolled by bureaucratic decisions made by people who didn't know we existed. The holographic display shifted again, showing what appeared to be a detailed analysis of Senate military capabilities, including fleet positions, weapon systems, and tactical doctrines. The level of detail was staggering and deeply concerning to the military representatives in the chamber. How did you obtain classified military intelligence? Razortail demanded, her reptilian features showing genuine alarm. The same way we obtained everything else, Sarah replied. We listened, we watched, and we learned. Your communication systems are very sophisticated, but they're also predictable once you understand the underlying principles. We've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. The implications were becoming clear to everyone in the chamber. Humanity hadn't just survived in secret. They had been actively gathering intelligence on every major civilization in the galaxy. They knew things about galactic military capabilities that some Senate members didn't know themselves. Administrator Kethvar's forearms trembled slightly as he processed the situation. Commander Chen, you're describing a civilization that has been conducting espionage operations against every member of the Galactic Senate for decades. That constitutes a massive security breach and potential act of war. Or, Sarah countered, it constitutes due diligence by a species trying to survive in a galaxy that has a history of destroying civilizations that don't fit into its established patterns. We studied you because we needed to understand what we were dealing with. We gathered intelligence because knowledge is the only real defense we had. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of species. You want to know the truth? We could have made contact decades ago. We could have announced ourselves and requested membership in your Senate. But we looked at your history, and we decided that it was safer to remain hidden until we were strong enough to negotiate from a position of equality rather than desperation. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Humanity hadn't just survived. They had deliberately chosen to remain outside galactic civilization until they could engage with it on their own terms. They had turned their supposed extinction into a strategic advantage, using the galaxy's own assumption of their death to build strength in secret. So here we are, Sarah concluded, not as refugee Sisti. The final vote was scheduled for the next day, but the real negotiations had been happening in the corridors, private chambers, and communication networks of the Senate station throughout the night. Commander Chen had spent 18 hours in back-to-back meetings with faction leaders, military advisors, economic councils, and individual representatives who wanted to understand exactly what humanity was offering, or threatening. Now, as she stood once again at the central podium of the Senate chamber, Sarah felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. The decision made in the next few hours would determine not just humanity's future, but potentially the future of galactic civilization itself. The precedent they set today would echo through the galaxy for generations. Administrator Kethvar looked as though he had aged several years overnight. His pale blue skin was almost white with stress, and his forearms moved with nervous energy as he called the final session to order. The Senate will now hear the final proposal regarding the status of the human species and the Sol system territorial dispute. Sarah activated the holographic display one last time, but instead of technical schematics or intelligence data, she showed something far more powerful. Images of human children playing in the parks of New Geneva on Europa, elderly humans tending gardens in the biodomes of Mars, and families celebrating what appeared to be a wedding in the magnificent crystal cities of Titan. Honorable delegates, she began, her voice carrying a warmth that had been absent from her previous presentations. I've spent the past day explaining to you what humanity can do, our technology, our capabilities, our intelligence networks, but I haven't told you who we are. The images shifted to show human artists creating sculptures that incorporated design elements from dozens of different alien cultures, human musicians performing concerts that blended Earth traditions with sounds and rhythms, learned from galactic communications, and human scientists working alongside salvaged alien technology to create entirely new forms of clean energy. We are not conquerors, Sarah continued. We're not empire builders or territorial expansionists. We're survivors who learned that the key to survival in this galaxy is adaptation, cooperation, and respect for the diversity that makes galactic civilization possible. Representative Void Song of the Crystalline Collective spoke up, their musical voice carrying genuine curiosity. Commander Chen, your species has demonstrated remarkable abilities, but you've also admitted to decades of espionage and unauthorized colonization. How can the Senate trust an entity that has operated in secret for so long? Sarah's response was immediate and direct. Because we're offering you something that has never been offered before. Complete transparency. Every human settlement, every piece of adapted technology, every intelligence report we've gathered over the past 70 years. We're willing to share all of it with the Senate freely and without reservation. The chamber stirred with surprise. Information was the most valuable commodity in galactic civilization, and Sarah was offering to hand over decades of collected intelligence without asking for anything in return. Furthermore, she continued, we're proposing a new model for galactic citizenship. Instead of the traditional process where a species is either accepted or rejected by the Senate, we propose a partnership model. Humanity will share our adaptive technologies and survival techniques with any species that wants to learn them. In exchange, we ask for recognition of our territorial claims and the right to continue developing our civilization according to our own principles. Administrator Kethvar leaned forward with interest. Explain this partnership model in more detail. Sarah advanced to the next display, showing a complex but elegant organizational chart. Traditional Senate membership requires species to conform to galactic standards. Specific governmental structures, economic systems, military doctrines. But what if instead of forcing conformity we celebrated diversity? What if species could maintain their unique characteristics while still participating in galactic civilization? The concept was revolutionary. For 3,000 years, the Senate had operated on the principle that galactic unity required standardization. Species that joined the Senate were expected to adapt their societies to fit established patterns. But humanity was proposing the opposite, a system that would allow civilizations to maintain their unique characteristics while still cooperating on common goals. We've already proven this works, Sarah explained. Our colonies include not just humans but members of several other species who chose to join us over the decades. We have Zephyrian engineers, crystalline scientists, and even a small community of insectoids who preferred our agricultural methods to their hive-based systems. We've learned that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. Representative Warcry of the Militant Alliance, who had been silent for most of the proceedings, suddenly spoke up. You claim to have members of other species in your colonies. Are these defectors refugees? How did they come to join you? Sarah's smile was genuine and warm. They're volunteers. Over the decades, we've encountered individuals from various species who were dissatisfied with the rigid structures of their home civilizations. We offered them alternatives, places where they could contribute their skills and knowledge while still maintaining their cultural identities. They chose to stay. The implications were staggering. If humanity had successfully integrated members of multiple alien species into their colonies, it suggested that their social model was not just functional but actually attractive to beings from other civilizations. You're describing a parallel civilization that exists alongside the Senate, observed Economic Representative Gold Calculation. What prevents this from becoming a competing power structure that undermines galactic unity? Because we're not competing, Sarah replied firmly. We're offering an alternative. The Senate model works well for many species, but it doesn't work for all of them. Rather than forcing unsuccessful integration or allowing civilizations to fail, we're proposing a system where different approaches can coexist. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed a map of the galaxy with traditional Senate territories in blue and human-influenced areas in green. Notably, the two colors didn't overlap. They complemented each other, filling gaps that the traditional system had left empty. We're offering to be the option for species that don't fit the traditional model, Sarah explained. The refugees, the misfits, the civilizations that are too small or too different to integrate into standard Senate structures. Instead of letting them fail or become extinct, we can offer them alternatives. Administrator Kethvar was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. You're proposing to become a safety net for galactic civilization? More than that, Sarah corrected. We're proposing to become partners in a larger vision of what galactic civilization could be. Imagine a galaxy where diversity is celebrated rather than eliminated, where small civilizations can thrive alongside large ones, where adaptation and innovation are rewarded rather than discouraged. The chamber buzzed with conversations as delegates considered the proposal. It was unlike anything that had ever been suggested in the Senate's history, but it also addressed problems that had plagued galactic civilization for millennia. Security Chief Razortail raised a practical concern. Commander Chen, your proposal sounds idealistic, but what about security? How do we maintain galactic stability if civilizations are allowed to develop along completely different lines? Sarah's expression became serious. Chief, I'll ask you a question in return. How many wars has the Senate fought against species that refuse to conform to your standards? How many civilizations have been destroyed because they couldn't or wouldn't adapt to Senate requirements? How much instability has been created by forcing unique cultures into identical molds? The question hit home. The Senate's history was filled with conflicts against so-called rogue civilizations that had refused to conform to galactic standards. Many of these wars had been devastating, lasting for centuries and consuming enormous resources. Our model isn't just idealistic, Sarah continued. It's practical. Happy, successful civilizations don't start wars. Cultures that feel respected and valued don't become threats to galactic stability. By providing alternatives to forced conformity, we can actually reduce conflict rather than increase it. The final vote was closer than anyone had expected. When the ballots were tallied, the result was unprecedented in Senate history. 423 votes in favor, 398 opposed, with 26 abstentions. It was the smallest margin of victory for any major Senate decision, but it was enough. Administrator Kethvar's voice was barely steady as he announced the results. By majority vote, the Galactic Senate hereby recognizes the human species as a sovereign civilization with legitimate territorial claims to the Sol system. The mining contract with the Hegemony Collective is declared null and void. Furthermore, humanity is granted a unique status as associate partners of the Galactic Senate, with the right to establish alternative social and political structures within their sphere of influence. The chamber erupted in cheers from some sections and worried murmurs from others. But Sarah Chen, standing at the central podium where her species had once been declared extinct, felt only a quiet satisfaction.